I arrived at the Villa Aurelia just as the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden, syrupy light over the city of Rome. The air was warm and smelled of jasmine and ancient stone. From the rooftop terrace you could see the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, a perfect silhouette against a sky blushing with pink and orange. It was a scene from a movie, a moment of impossible beauty. And it was all for Eleanor. For my mother-in-law's 70th birthday, I had wanted to give her a memory she would never forget. I had flown her entire family here, put them up in a 5-star hotel, and booked this exclusive venue for the grand finale. A long, elegant table was set for 13, draped in white linen and decorated with cascades of fresh flowers. A string quartet was playing softly in the corner. It was perfect. The family was already there, gathered near the edge of the terrace, laughing and sipping champagne. My husband, Leo, stood in the center of the group, looking handsome and confident in his tailored suit. He was telling a story, his hands gesturing dramatically, and his family hung on his every word. His mother, Eleanor, the guest of honor, looked radiant in a silk dress, a smug, satisfied smile on her face. I took a deep breath, a genuine smile on my face for the first time in a long time. Maybe this was it. Maybe this grand gesture, this overwhelming act of generosity, would finally be enough. Maybe tonight, they would finally see me as one of them. I walked towards them, my heels clicking softly on the terracotta tiles. "It looks beautiful, doesn't it?" I said, my voice full of warmth. Leo turned and saw me. His smile widened, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Grace, there you are. We were just about to sit down." The family began to move towards the long, elegant table. I followed, looking for my place card. I walked the length of the table, my eyes scanning the little white cards propped against the crystal glasses. I saw Eleanor's name at the head of the table. I saw Leo's, his sister Clara's, their aunts, uncles, and cousins. I walked all the way to the end and then back again. There was no seat for me. The table was set for 12. There were 13 guests. A cold, strange feeling began to creep up my spine. I looked at the empty space at the end of the table, a blank spot where a chair and a place setting should have been. It was a void, an omission. I turned to Leo, a confused question on my lips, but he was already looking at me, a wide, amused grin on his face. "Well? Look at that," he said, his voice booming so everyone could hear. "Looks like we miscounted." His sister Clara let out a high-pitched giggle. A few of the cousins snickered. They were all looking at me, their eyes sparkling with a shared, cruel joke. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, didn't laugh. She just smiled, a slow, triumphant smile that said, "This is where you belong. Nowhere." And in that moment, everything became clear. The years of subtle insults, the backhanded compliments, the way they always treated me like an outsider, a temporary guest in their family. It wasn't my imagination. It was real. And this wasn't a mistake. This was a message. The hurt was a sharp, physical pain in my chest. But then, something else washed over me. It was a profound, icy calm. The part of me that had tried so hard, for so long, to win their approval simply died. It withered and turned to dust. I looked at my husband, at his laughing face, and I felt nothing. I looked at his mother, at her smug, victorious smile, and I felt nothing. They had finally succeeded. They had pushed me out. I smiled back at them, a small, quiet smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I guess that means I'm not part of the family," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Then I turned, and without another word, I walked away. I walked past the beautiful table, past the string quartet, and towards the exit. I didn't look back. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I stepped out into the warm Roman night and took out my phone. I made one brief, 2-minute phone call. Half an hour later, up on that beautiful rooftop, as the waiters were preparing to serve the first course of truffle pasta, the venue manager approached Eleanor's table. His face was apologetic but firm. He informed her that the entire event, the venue, the catering, the bar, the musicians, everything, had just been canceled. The credit card on file had been withdrawn. I wasn't there to see it, but I could picture their faces, the smug amusement turning to confusion, then to disbelief, and finally to the pale, sickly white of pure, horrified panic. The empty chair wasn't the beginning of the story, it was the end. The beginning was 3 months ago, in the cold, gray light of a London afternoon. It began with a desperate, foolish hope. For years, I had existed on the fringes of Leo's family. I was a ghost at their holiday dinners, a silent observer at their birthday parties. They weren't openly hostile. Their cruelty was a more subtle, refined poison. It was in the way Eleanor, my mother-in-law, would look at my simple, elegant dress and say, "Oh, Grace, that's practical." It was in the way Leo's sister Clara would ask me about my little hobbies with a pitying smile, completely ignoring the fact that I ran a multi-million-dollar company. They had a story they told themselves, and they all believed it. In their story, Leo was a brilliant, self-made executive who had married a plain, simple girl from a modest background. They thought my quietness was a lack of intelligence. They saw my patience as weakness. They had no idea that their entire lifestyle, their expensive cars, their designer clothes, their leisurely, work-free lives, was funded by the very woman they looked down on. I had let them believe the story. I thought that if I was just patient enough, just kind enough, they would eventually see me for who I was. I thought love and generosity could conquer their pride. I was wrong. The idea for the grand gesture came to me when Eleanor started talking about her upcoming 70th birthday. "I've always dreamed of seeing Rome in the spring," she'd sighed dramatically at a family dinner, "to stand in the Forum, to see the Sistine Chapel, but I suppose it's just a silly old woman's dream." Leo and Clara exchanged sad, helpless looks. They knew they couldn't afford such a trip. But I could. And in a moment of what I can only describe as temporary insanity, I saw an opportunity. This was it. This was the grand gesture that would finally, undeniably, win them over. I would give them the gift of a lifetime. I would make Eleanor's dream come true. They would have to accept me then. They would have to love me. "I can make it happen," I said quietly. The table went silent. 13 pairs of eyes turned to me. "I'll do it," I said, my voice gaining confidence. "For your birthday, Eleanor, I'll fly the whole family to Rome for a week, first class. We'll stay at the best hotel. We'll do everything. My treat." Their reaction was instantaneous. The initial shock quickly melted into greedy, unrestrained enthusiasm. They didn't ask how I could afford it. They didn't question it. In their minds, Leo was so successful that of course his wife would have access to this kind of money. They saw it not as a gift from me, but as their due, a perk of being related to a man as important as Leo. "Oh, Grace, you darling," Eleanor had cried, her eyes gleaming. Clara had hugged me, her embrace feeling more possessive than affectionate. For the next 3 months, I became a full-time travel agent. I poured my heart into planning the perfect trip. I spent hours researching, booking, and coordinating. I chose the 5-star Hotel de Russie with its beautiful terraced gardens. I booked first-class flights for everyone. I arranged private tours of the Vatican and the Colosseum. I made reservations at restaurants that had waiting lists months long. And for the main event, Eleanor's birthday dinner, I pulled out all the stops. I found the Villa Aurelia, a stunning 17th-century villa with a rooftop terrace that offered the most breathtaking view of Rome. I worked with their event coordinator to plan every single detail, from the 5-course tasting menu to the specific type of white roses Eleanor loved. I paid for everything myself, from my own personal accounts. It was a staggering amount of money, but I didn't care. I saw it as an investment in a family that I so desperately wanted to be a part of. As I clicked confirm on the final payment for the venue, a week before we were due to leave, I felt a surge of hope. I had done it. I had created a perfect, undeniable act of love. They couldn't ignore this. They couldn't dismiss this. When they were standing on that rooftop, surrounded by beauty that I had provided, they would finally have to see me. They would finally have to let me in. It was a fool's hope, but it was all I had. To understand how I could afford to fly 13 people to Rome and then cancel the entire affair with a single phone call, you need to understand the secret I had kept for my entire marriage. It was a secret my husband's family was too arrogant to ever even imagine. The story they told themselves about me, the quiet, simple librarian's daughter, was a comfortable fiction. The truth was far more complicated. My father wasn't a librarian. He was a brilliant engineer and a shrewd businessman. He had started a small manufacturing company in his garage, and over 40 years had built it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Davies Manufacturing wasn't a flashy tech startup. It made high-precision components for the aerospace and medical industries. It was a quiet, powerful, and incredibly profitable business. When my father passed away 5 years ago, he left the entire company to me. Not just his money, but the company itself. I was his only child, and he had spent years teaching me the business, not in a boardroom, but over dinner, discussing logistics and supply chains the way other families discuss the weather. I inherited his title, CEO. But I am not my father. He loved the spotlight, the handshakes, the deal-making. I am a quiet person. I love the numbers, the strategy, the quiet satisfaction of a well-run operation. So, I made a choice. I promoted my father's trusted second-in-command to be the public-facing president of the company. I kept the title of CEO but remained behind the scenes, managing the big-picture strategy and the finances from a secure home office. Only a handful of people knew the truth: my lawyer, Mr. Davies, the company president, and me. To the rest of the world, I was just Grace Miller, a woman who didn't have a career. When I married Leo, he was working a mid-level sales job he hated. He was charming and ambitious, but he lacked focus. After my father died, Leo saw the inheritance money as his ticket to freedom. He wanted to start his own business, to be a founder. I knew him well enough to know that giving him a lump sum of cash would be like giving a child a box of matches. He would burn through it in a year. But I loved him, and I wanted him to be happy. So, with Mr. Davies's help, I devised a solution. I created a new position at Davies Manufacturing, head of European business development. It was a consultant role. It came with a huge salary, a generous expense account, and almost no actual responsibilities. It required him to network and take a few trips to Europe each year, all paid for by the company. I offered him the job. He was ecstatic. He quit his sales job the next day. He told his family that he had been headhunted for a major executive role at a prestigious international firm. He never mentioned the company's name was Davies Manufacturing. He never mentioned it was my company. He let them believe he was a self-made man, a high-powered executive whose career was taking off. And I let him. It was a mistake. I see that now. I did it out of love, to protect his pride. But all it did was feed his ego and fuel his family's narrative. They saw his new, expensive car, the tailored suits, the confident way he talked about his deals. They saw the money, and they assumed it was his. They saw me, his quiet wife who stayed home, and they assumed I was his dependent. He became a character in a play of his own making, and he forgot he was acting. He started to believe his own lies. He truly thought of himself as the provider, the one who was generously supporting me. So when I offered to pay for the trip to Rome, he and his family didn't see it as me spending my money. They saw it as me spending his money, money he had so graciously allowed me access to. In their minds, I wasn't giving them a gift. I was just the bank teller handing them cash from their son's account. That's why they felt so comfortable humiliating me. Why would they show respect to the bank teller? I was just a functionary, a means to an end. I wasn't the source of their wealth. I was just the quiet, simple woman who happened to be married to the king. They had no idea they were living in a castle that I owned, following the orders of a king who was nothing more than a well-paid court jester. The day of the dinner began with a fragile, fluttering hope in my chest. We were in Rome. The sun was shining. The city was alive with a vibrant, chaotic energy. I had spent the morning on my own, wandering through the Borghese gardens, trying to soak in a sense of peace before the evening's main event. I truly believed that tonight could be a turning point. The sheer scale of my gift, I thought, had to be enough to finally break through their pride. I returned to our hotel suite in the late afternoon to get ready. The suite was enormous, with a sprawling terrace that overlooked the Spanish Steps. Leo was already there, on his phone, laughing loudly at something his sister was saying. He ended the call when he saw me. "There you are," he said, giving me a quick, distracted kiss. "You'd better get ready. Mom wants us all there right at 7. I went into the bedroom to lay out my dress. It was a simple, elegant navy blue gown. I had chosen it because it was understated. I didn't want to look like I was showing off. I wanted to look like part of the family, not the host of the event. As I was getting ready, I felt a sudden need for some fresh air. The hope in my chest was mixing with a familiar anxiety, a tightness that always appeared before a family gathering. I stepped out onto the balcony. Our suite was connected to the one next door, where Leo's mother and sister were staying, by this long shared terrace. I leaned on the railing, looking out at the beautiful city, when I heard voices from the next room. The balcony door was ajar. It was Leo. He must have gone into his mother's suite while I was in the shower. He was talking to his sister Clara, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Is everything set for tonight?" Clara asked, her voice sharp with excitement. "The plan is set," Leo replied, and I could hear the chuckle in his voice. "We're not setting a place for her at the table. Mom thinks it's hilarious. It's perfect. Right at the head of the table there's just nothing. She'll have to stand there like an idiot." My blood ran cold. I froze, my hand gripping the cold stone of the railing. I couldn't breathe. "It's about time she learned her place," Clara said, her voice dripping with venom. "She walks around with that quiet, superior attitude, like she's better than us, after everything Leo has given her." "Exactly," Leo agreed. "She needs to be reminded that she's only here because of me. This whole trip, this fancy dinner, it's all because of me. She's just lucky to be along for the ride. A little public humiliation is good for her. It will keep her grateful." The hope in my heart didn't just die. It was murdered. It was stabbed, repeatedly, by the casual cruelty in my husband's voice. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was a plan. A deliberate, calculated prank designed to humiliate me at the very event I had orchestrated and paid for. They were going to make me stand there, alone and excluded, in front of the entire family, at a party that cost me more than they earned in a year. They wanted to teach me a lesson about my place. I didn't make a sound. I quietly, carefully, stepped back from the railing and slipped back into my room. My hands were not shaking. My eyes were not filling with tears. The woman who had been desperate for their approval was gone. In her place was someone cold, clear, and decisive. In her place was the CEO of Davies Manufacturing. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my back straight. I opened my laptop. It took only a few seconds to find the number for the event coordinator at the Villa Aurelia. I made a brief 2-minute phone call, my voice calm and professional. I confirmed my identity and my corporate payment details. Then I gave a single, clear instruction. After I hung up, I made a second call. This one was to my lawyer, Mr. Davies, back in London. He answered immediately. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice as cool as ice. "It's Grace. I need you to do something for me. I need you to freeze all joint accounts and cancel all supplementary credit cards tied to the primary account holder. Effective immediately." He didn't ask why. He just said, "Consider it done, Grace." I closed the laptop. I stood up and looked at my reflection in the mirror. The anxious, hopeful woman from an hour ago was gone. In her place was a stranger I was just beginning to recognize. She was calm, she was in control, and she was done. I finished getting ready for dinner. I didn't go back to the hotel. After leaving the Villa Aurelia, I walked. I walked through the ancient, moonlit streets of Rome, with no destination in mind. The city was alive around me, couples laughing, music spilling from open doorways, but I was in a silent bubble of my own. The cold, hard knot of anger in my chest had finally loosened, leaving behind a vast, quiet emptiness. It wasn't a sad emptiness, it was a clean one, a blank slate. I found a small, quiet cafe that was still open, ordered an espresso, and sat at a tiny table outside. From there, I had a clear view of the street leading up to the five-star hotel where my husband and his family were staying. I just sat there, sipping my coffee, and waited. I knew the aftermath was coming. About an hour later, I saw them. They weren't the laughing, confident group that had been sipping champagne on the rooftop. They were a scattered, bickering mess, straggling down the street like a defeated army. Eleanor was in the lead, her face a mask of thunderous rage. She was walking so fast her children could barely keep up. Clara was beside her, gesticulating wildly, her voice a high-pitched, angry squeak that I could hear even from half a block away. The aunts and uncles trailed behind, whispering amongst themselves, casting furious glances at each other. And then there was Leo. He was at the very back of the pack, his tie loosened, his jacket slung over his shoulder. He was yelling into his phone, his face red with fury and humiliation. Even from a distance, I could imagine the conversation. He would be trying to use his credit cards, the ones I had just canceled, and they would be declined one by one. He was trying to save face, to prove that he was the powerful man he pretended to be, but his power had just been switched off at the source. I watched them disappear into the grand entrance of the hotel, a wave of chaos and recrimination. The show was over, but the fallout was just beginning. I finished my espresso and took a taxi to a different hotel, a small, discreet boutique place I had booked for myself on the other side of the city. I checked in under my maiden name. In the quiet, clean room, I finally allowed myself to feel something. It wasn't sadness for the end of my marriage. That had died on the balcony. It was a profound sense of relief, as if I had been carrying a 100-pound weight on my back for 10 years and had just set it down. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was from. "Where are you? What have you done? You have humiliated my mother. You have ruined everything. Call me now." It was Leo. I deleted the message without replying. A few minutes later, another one came through. "My cards aren't working. Did you do something to the accounts? This is insane, Grace. You are acting like a child. Fix this." I deleted that one too. I spent the day doing what I had wanted to do all along. I visited the Pantheon, marveling at the perfect circle of light from the oculus. I wandered through the Roman Forum, imagining the history that had unfolded on the very stones beneath my feet. I ate a simple lunch of pasta and wine at a tiny trattoria, enjoying the food without the pressure of a family dinner. I was alone, and it was glorious. That evening, I sat in my hotel room and looked up the flight schedules. I saw that the entire family had booked new flights home on a budget airline, leaving that night. Their first-class tickets, of course, had been tied to my credit card and were now void. The luxurious week-long Roman holiday had been cut short after 2 disastrous days. I pictured them at the airport, exhausted, furious, and humiliated. They had come to Rome expecting to be treated like royalty. They were leaving like scolded children, their grand vacation shattered. They had wanted to teach me a lesson about my place in the family. Instead, they had received a very expensive lesson about theirs in the world. They had flown to the peak of luxury on my wings, and I had just let them drop. And the long fall back to reality was just beginning. I gave them a 2-day head start. I spent 2 more days in Rome, by myself, feeling the city's ancient pulse. I walked until my feet ached, ate gelato in sun-drenched piazzas, and sat for hours in quiet churches, not praying, but just breathing. I was reclaiming my time, my peace, myself. For the first time in a decade, my life was entirely my own. Then, I flew home. Not to the large, cold house I had shared with Leo, but to a sleek, serviced apartment in the city center that Mr. Davies had arranged for me. When Leo arrived back at our house, he would have been expecting a fight. He would have been armed with a speech full of righteous anger, ready to yell, to blame, to demand. He would have been ready for tears, for arguments, for a dramatic, messy confrontation. Instead, he would have found only silence. I had arranged for a moving company to come the day before I returned. They were discreet and professional. They packed every single thing that belonged to me: my clothes, my books, my father's portrait, the furniture I had inherited. They worked for 6 hours, stripping the house of any trace of my existence. The life I had built within those walls was packed into boxes and taken away, leaving behind nothing but a beautiful, empty shell. When Leo walked in, he would have found a house that was no longer a home. The closets would be half empty. The bookshelves would be bare. The walls where my favorite paintings used to hang would show faint, pale rectangles. It would feel like a museum after closing time, a place that was once full of life, now hollow and still. He would have stormed through the rooms, his anger turning to a cold, creeping dread. He would have called my phone, but the number would have been disconnected. He would have called my friends, but they would have been instructed not to answer. He would be completely, utterly cut off, and then he would have seen it. On the center of the large, polished dining room table, the table where we had shared thousands of meals, there would be a single, thick, cream-colored envelope. His name would be written on the front in Mr. I. Davis's elegant, formal script. His hands would be trembling as he opened it. Inside, he would not find a letter from me. There would be no emotional explanation, no angry tirade. My part in our communication was over. Inside, there would be 2 official documents. The first would be a letter printed on the formal letterhead of Davies Manufacturing. It would be from the Human Resources Department. It would be a formal notice of termination. It would state that his consultancy role as head of European business development was terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct. It would cite a clause in his employment contract about behavior that brings the company into disrepute. The humiliation of a family member of the CEO, it would explain, certainly qualified. His 6-figure salary, his expense account, his company car, all of it, gone. The second document would be from the law firm of Davies, Peterson & Howe. It would be a cold, legal letter officially beginning divorce proceedings. It would be short and brutal. It would inform him that since he had entered the marriage with no significant assets and had been financially supported by his wife for the duration of the marriage, he was entitled to nothing. It would then list the assets he believed were his: the house, the 2 luxury cars, the investment accounts he occasionally looked at online, and next to each item, it would state the legal reality. Asset of Davies Manufacturing, owned exclusively by the CEO, Grace Davies. I had started using my maiden name again. That would be the moment the floor fell away. That would be the moment the carefully constructed fiction of his entire adult life would shatter into a million pieces. He wasn't a self-made executive. He wasn't the provider. He wasn't the king of his own castle. He was an unemployed man standing in a house that wasn't his, with no money, no job, and no future. He had not just lost a vacation. He had not just lost a wife. He had lost the very identity he had built for himself. He was a character in a play, and the stage, the lights, and the script had all just been taken away. He was nothing, and he had no one to blame but himself. It took him 3 days to find me. 3 days of what I can only imagine was a frantic, spiraling panic. He would have called his mother, his sister, his friends, only to realize that none of them could help him. Their collective wealth and status was a reflection of his, and his was a reflection of mine. The mirror had been taken away, and they were all left staring at a blank wall. He didn't find me at my new apartment. He didn't find me at a friend's house. He found me at the last place on earth he would have ever thought to look. He found me at work. The headquarters of Davies Manufacturing is a large, imposing glass and steel building in the heart of the city's financial district. It's a place Leo had never been. In his mind, it was just a name, a vague entity that sent him a paycheck every month. He had no idea what it truly was. He must have been a sight, striding into the pristine corporate lobby, his face a mess of desperation and rage. He would have demanded to see me, and the receptionist, seeing his name on a security alert, would have calmly called upstairs. I had them bring him up. Not to a conference room, to my office. The CEO's office is on the top floor. It's a large, light-filled corner suite with panoramic views of the city. One entire wall is glass. My father's name is not on the door. My name is Grace Davies. When the security guards escorted him in, he stopped dead just inside the doorway. He stared at the name on the door, then at me. I was not sitting behind a desk. I was standing by the large glass wall looking out at the city. I turned to face him. I was wearing a sharp, tailored business dress. I was not the quiet, unassuming woman he had left in Rome. "Grace?" he whispered, his voice filled with a disbelief so profound it was almost comical. "What is this? What are you doing here?" "I work here, Leo," I said, my voice calm and even. "I own here." He looked around the vast office, at the expensive furniture, the stunning view, his mind struggling to connect the dots. "Davies Manufacturing," he said, reading the name from a document on my desk. "Your father—" "My father started this company," I said. "And when he died, he left it to me. I have been the CEO for the last 5 years. The blood drained from his face. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the full, horrifying picture was revealed to him. His high-powered job, his huge salary, his entire career, it was all a sham. A gift from the woman he had treated like a servant. "No," he stammered, shaking his head. "No, that's not possible." He took a step forward, his desperation turning back to anger. "You tricked me. You lied to me for years." I almost laughed. "I lied? I lied, Leo? I kept a secret to protect your fragile ego. You built an entire second life and told your family I was a penniless nobody you were generously supporting. We are not the same." He broke then. The anger dissolved, replaced by a pathetic, pleading whimper. "Grace, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry. It was a joke. A stupid, stupid joke. I love you. We can fix this. I'll talk to my mother, my sister. I'll make them apologize." I looked at him, at this man who was now offering the apologies of others as if they were his to give. He still didn't get it. "There is nothing to fix, Leo," I said, my voice soft but final. "The divorce will be swift. Our prenuptial agreement is very clear. What's mine is mine. You brought nothing into this marriage, and you will take nothing out." I walked over to my desk and pressed a button on my intercom. "Security to my office, please." "You can't do this," he whispered, tears now streaming down his face. "I have nothing." "You have exactly what you have earned," I replied. "And the dinner in Rome? You can tell your mother it wasn't a family event that I ruined, it was a corporate event for a consultant, and it was cancelled upon his termination." The 2 security guards entered the room. They were large, professional, and unmoved by the sight of a grown man crying. "Please show Mr. Peterson out," I said. They each took one of his arms and gently but firmly led him away. He didn't struggle. He was a broken man. I stood at the window for a long time after he was gone, watching the endless flow of traffic on the streets below. I felt no triumph, no joy, just a quiet, profound peace. The matriarch of his family had tried to put me in my place. Now, I was finally standing in my own.